Welcome everyone to another coffee tasting. I'm your host Aaron Taylor, and today we are tasting a brand new blend called the Odyssey Blend by Starbucks. This is a 3-region blend, and so we're going to have regions from Latin America, Africa, and Indonesia. So this is going to be a really special blend because it pays tribute to sustainable farming and making sure that farmers can properly grow coffee. One moment. I think I misclicked something. Oh, no. Nope, my video is just lagging. Okay, so we're good to go. Alright, welcome everyone to another coffee tasting. I'm your host, Aaron Taylor. Today we're tasting a special coffee. It is a brand new blend by Starbucks. It is a 3-region blend from Latin America, Africa, and Indonesia. And what makes this bag of coffee so special is we're highlighting sustainable coffee and how coffee impacts the farmers around the world and how it makes their livelihoods better in terms of being able to grow coffee and what it does for their environment. So really cool. With this Odyssey blend, we get notes of tangerine zest with the wild honey. And with those wild honey notes, it's just going to be like almost like a sweet floral flavor. So when you try honey all by itself, you get like the floral notes that the bee acquired the pollen from. So like sometimes when you get like specific flavored honey, that means like farmers are controlling the environment or the pollen that those bees harvest their pollen from to get a specific flavor. And so with this, the honey sweetness, the wild honey notes that we're getting is just those sweet floral notes that is going to be similar to like honey if you try honey by itself with those floralness that honey kind of has. So really good. This is going to be a brighter cup of coffee. And then for those of you guys who are joining me for the first time, uh, welcome. Thank you for joining me. And those of you guys who are returning, welcome back. It is an honor to have everyone. If you haven't had a chance, hit that like and subscribe button down below. That really helps me evolve and develop this channel and make it that much better and to provide more content for you guys so we can learn a little bit more about coffee. Also, with this channel, we like to brew our coffee 3 different ways. That way we get to explore the different flavor notes that we get from the 3 different brewing methods, even though it is the same coffee. So with the paper filter, we're getting more oils, less sediments. With the Chemex, we're getting less oils and less sediments. And with the French press, we're getting all the sediments and all the oils that you want to have a full flavor cup of coffee. So when you're doing a pour over, when you initially pour your a little bit of water, you just want to pour a little bit to kind of get all the waters wet, and then you all the grinds wet. Sorry, all the waters wet. You want to get all the grinds wet, and then you want to let it kind of sink. And what happens is the bubbles and all the air in between the grinds rises to the top, and we call that blooming. You want to make sure your coffee blooms so that the air doesn't get trapped at the bottom of the filter. Because when the air gets trapped at the bottom of the filter, it creates this barrier, slowing down your brew process, causing for you to have a bolder cup of coffee than you should. So you want to get all the grinds wet, stop, and then you let it bloom. And then sometimes you get some really cool bloom effects. Sometimes you get like a nice dome. And then when you pour your next set of water, it kind of breaks the surface of the dome, and the air that's like just beneath that surface releases itself. But what's important is that air isn't at the bottom, creating that dome or creating the barrier, slowing down your brew process. And making sure your brew process doesn't get slowed down is very important, because if you slow down your brew process, you're going to end up with a bitter cup of coffee. And you don't want to do that, because making sure you brew your coffee correctly is important, because you want to have those good flavors and the flavors that the farmers intended for you to taste. And a lot of work goes into growing coffee and the dedication that the farmers are creating new innovative ways to create sustainable farming and to maintain those robust flavors that we all love from a good cup of coffee. And so the amount of work that goes into those new innovations and then still maintaining those bold, intense, and complex flavors, um, it's a lot of work. And so we have to make sure that we pay tribute to that work by brewing our coffee right, because to improperly brew their coffee is kind of like a dishonor. So making sure you brew your coffee correctly, you guys, is very important. And so you want to make sure you get the proper amount of grinds, the proper amount of water, and then also making sure you do the brew process properly, knowing the different processes for each method. With the paper filters, you definitely want to make sure you bloom your coffee, you guys. Very important. If your coffee's taking longer than 3 minutes to brew and it's a pour over, chances are there's some air trapped at the bottom, causing it to slow down, and you want to make sure to avoid that. So a good pour over should take around 2.5 minutes for a 16-ounce cup of coffee. With a venti cup of coffee or a 20-ounce cup of coffee, it should still be around 2.5 minutes. It might get a little bit closer to 3 minutes. But if you let it properly bloom, it should still be around the same amount of time as a 16 ounce. Just a little bit longer, probably like maybe 15 seconds. So we're looking at 2 minutes and 45 seconds. If you're ranging the 4 minute time for your pour over, it's definitely overbrewed, and you're going to end up with a more of a brighter, intense cup of coffee, and it's going to impact the flavor. I don't really like the bright, intense, fruity flavors or citrus flavors or bright, roasty flavors in a cup of coffee, which is why I tend to lean more towards the French press, because it helps bring out those earthy notes. And so with those earthy notes, those citrus notes kind of take a back seat, and we're getting more of those bitters, which is what I look for in my cup of coffee. And so if I improperly brew my pour over, it's going to bring out more of those bright citrusy notes, and that's going to impact my coffee in a major way, because I really tend to lean away from those bright citrusy notes. And so if I'm getting extra of those notes, I'm definitely not going to like it. So it could definitely impact my opinion of the coffee if I don't brew my coffee properly. Okay. So we're going to go ahead and try the pour over. So with the coffee tastings, we do it in a couple steps. First, we go ahead and smell our coffee. We're going to really smell the aromas that are wafting off the top. So with this, we are definitely getting those bright floral flavors, almost like like it says, the sweet honey notes with the tangerine zest. Oh yeah. Okay. So immediately right off the bat, we're getting those bright orange flavors, the tangerine notes, and then as it starts to wash over the palate of our tongue, we get more of those floral flavors, that sweet honey flavor that washes over the rest of our mouth. So we get that first initial tangerine zest punch from on the sides of our tongue, and then as it settles in, we get that floral wash, and it almost gives like a slight dry mouth feeling towards the center of your tongue. Not too intense, not as intense as some of the other coffees we've tried on this channel, but we are definitely getting a slight dry mouth feeling. It is a really, really good cup of coffee. Very, very smooth. The that punch that you get from that tangerine zest is very quick. It doesn't linger on, and then the floral, the sweet honey, wild honey, kind of takes over right after that. You get that tangerine zest punch. Very interesting. Some strong floral flavors going on there. If anyone who likes a nice, like, hoppy beer, like an IPA, would definitely love this particular cup of coffee, because we're getting those stronger floral notes. Very interesting. I like how that cup of coffee doesn't necessarily give us that dry mouth feeling that we really get with a lot of the floral coffees. We are getting a little bit of that dry mouth feeling, but not nearly as intense as some of the coffees we've tried. Some of the coffees we've tried have left like a almost like a dry wine mouth feeling where you really need something to pair with. So this is the Chemex, you guys. With the Chemex, it is a triple paper filtered, so we're getting less oils and less sediments. So we're gonna get a more of those smooth milk chocolate notes from the Latin American are gonna come through, but we're still gonna primarily get those floral flavors. So we are getting a little bit more of those bitters from that coffee that we normally see from coffee, but we are still getting those strong floral flavors from this one. Really, really good. I like this on the Chemex more because that tangerine zest is a little bit more subtle, and that subtle tangerine zest allows for more of those bitter flavors from the coffee to come forward, and then we have that slight floral wash that washes over our tongue after those initial flavors wash away. And so we're left with a subtle floral flavor with a very beginning of a slight bitter bite. Really, really good. I like the Chemex. Really good so far. All right, let's do the French press. So with the French press, this one is a full immersive cup of coffee. It's on a coarse grind, and this one comes into contact with the water longer than the rest, but it has a coarser grind, which means that there is less surface area for the water to come in contact with. So even though it's submerged in water and in contact with the water longer, we have less contact surface for the water to brew with. So it kind of almost balances out, and it just gives us a little bit more of a different flavor profile. Um, and then also what that does is it allows our plunger to work, because if we grind it too fine, it doesn't allow for the plunger to plunge properly. And then also it can cause, if you grind your coffee too fine in a French press and you have a glass French press or a fragile French press like this one, you can end up shattering it by the pressure, by pushing down on the plunger. The water has too much of a hard time passing through, and so you can end up breaking your French press. So making sure you get the proper grind is not important for just flavor, but important for safety as well. And then another thing too is if you do the grind too fine, you're going to end up with like a heavy mud at the bottom of your cup, and that's going to impact the flavor severely. So you want to make sure you get your grind properly for your different brew processes to make sure that we get that consistent cup. So with this one, that tangerine zest that we get in the pour over is definitely not as predominant. We still get a little bit of that tangerine flavor, but it doesn't like bite your tongue at the very beginning like it does on the pour over. But what's really nice is we really get that sweet wild honey flavor. We're getting like the sweet notes because we're initially hit with those intense bitters from the coffee. And as those intense bitters wash away, we're left with that the wild honey floral flavors that's washed over the palate of our tongue. And because our tongue is used to those initial bitter flavors that was hit with our tongue from the first sip, as it washes away, that floral wild honey wash that we have left on our tongue has a sweet flavor because our tongue is used to those bitters that we just washed over our tongue before that. So in contrast to the bitters that we just drank, as it washes away, that wild honey floral flavor that's left on our tongue has a sweetness to it. So that's why we attribute it to honey. So we have floral flavors that is left over after the bitters, and because the contrast to the bitters, the florals taste sweet, and so it's almost as if it has a wild honey flavor. Really, really good. The French press is exceptional on this cup of coffee. I like it a lot on the French press just because it's really highlighting those honey notes. The tangerine zest really takes a back seat. We do get a little bit of that tangerine zest in the very beginning, but we're primarily getting those natural coffee bitters, that bitter flavor that you get from coffee from the very initial sip, and then we're left with that floral wash. And that's really nice because it's not an intense floral wash like we do get in the pour over. It's nice and subtle and has a sweet flavor because it's contrasting itself to those and that initial bitter flavor that we get from the first sip. So really, really good. I do like the Chemex on this cup of coffee. We do get a little bit more of those floral flavors in the Chemex, but I really like the French press because it really highlights that honey sweetness because it's contrasting the bitters right before we're tasting those floral notes, making those floral notes taste a little sweeter. And so that's why those floral notes taste sweet, is because we're getting those bitter flavors first, then the floral flavors after the bitters wash away. So it gives it a sweet note. So with the Odyssey blend, this is a new blend. This is the first year that this blend has come out, and this blend is dedicated to sustainable farming and dedicated to teaching people about how coffee is made